Welcome to Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation possible. You'll get to hear from CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve process challenges and how they earn success in their careers. Along the way, we'll touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, you will enjoy the insights CSIA members bring to this podcast. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Lisa Richter, the host of Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation and processing possible. In today's episode, we're talking industrial automation with Joe LaRussa, Director of Industrial Engineering for the North American seat business at Brose, a global automotive mechatronic solutions provider. In this role, Joe leads a team of manufacturing and industrial engineers responsible for manufacturing process design, as well as the specification, acquisition, commissioning, and launch of capital equipment. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we met a couple weeks ago at an industry event, and you shared with me that the challenge so many organizations are facing, and that's finding talent. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the starting point would be capacity-wise. You know, there's been a global war on talent for manufacturing for a while, and that talent war has extended itself into North America for quite some time. Many of you out there may have heard about a skills shortage or a need for more skilled workforce, and that's really a function of fewer people going into the disciplines that feed manufacturing. Two areas that I particularly struggle with are controls engineers and those that have some tooling experience. I mean, people who can actually create things or fabricate, and then those who can actually program the brains of our machinery. Those are two key areas where I would say the capacity is really limited. Then on top of that, the other end of this is the capability of these people. A lot of times I find that the experience, there's either not enough or there's simply not enough transferable skill set to make people function well. So one example of this at Brose, our industrial engineers are really a combination resource. They have to understand the traditional industrial engineering methods regarding time studies and layouts and capacity loading and leveling and work breakdown, but they also have to have a healthy dose of manufacturing science, you know, the discipline of turning raw material into a finished good. And that is a particularly hard combination to find in the marketplace, because you either see people who are like, I'm an industrial engineer, or you talk to people who say, I'm a manufacturing engineer. So a lot of times I'm put in a situation where the transferable skills of industrial engineers go really well, but the manufacturing science is very specialized. So maybe we need somebody who's good with threaded fastening or forming or welding. And these folks that I see are more into adhesive deposition or carbon fiber reinforced plastics or more specialty manufacturing sciences. Well, that presents a very unique problem for me as a hiring manager, because I'm really looking for people with capabilities in a different manufacturing science. I would say capacity and capability are two dimensions of the same problem when it comes to finding talent in manufacturing.
Given our audience, which includes a lot of system integrators, what specifically would you look for when you are hiring an SI or an SI company?
That's a great question, and I spend a lot of time discussing that with purchasing and my engineers. Obviously, there are certain things related to competitiveness, and purchasing does a good job of vetting our supply base very well in terms of who can meet our timing, who can meet our costs, do they possess certifications like those from CSIA and other companies. That's kind of the first, or other professional associations. That's kind of the first filter. Then when we find that qualified pool, really we go to the next level, which is what my team and my engineers are doing, and looking at, okay, what are the project management skills that this integrator has? Do they have the ability to assess risk on a project? Not just technical risk, communication risk. Are we talking to the right people at the right time? Are we bringing in the right resources when they're needed? These kinds of skills are very important for me, because my team tends to be lacking in those skills as well. So we really need strong project management from our integrators. I'm also looking for a good mix of mechanical, electrical, and programming, right? I want to make sure there's a strong balance among those three areas of knowledge where the integrators really add value for us. because my team is not in the business of designing and constructing and integrating machinery. So we really need a strong integration expertise to be deployed on our various projects. A third thing would be change control. How well do our integrators do at communicating and closing changes? I've seen a lot of occasions where, the communication breaks down for various reasons and we kind of leave something hanging or lingering or languishing without a firm yes or no. And that's a two-way street. Us as a customer, we need to provide feedback when a change in scope is flagged by our system integrator, and we owe them an answer. And many times, there's a need for the integrator to maybe have an accountability dialogue with us as a customer and say, hey, this has been hanging open for a while. We need a clear answer because we need to know whether we need to organize resources to execute this, or if it's not, then we can deploy those resources on something else. So I think for me, what my team is looking for is good change control, good balance between mechanical, electrical, and programming disciplines, and very high project management skills to make sure that our integration projects are running well and that we're getting the value that the values two-way.
Do you want to connect with the best in the business? Then the CSIA Industrial Automation Exchange is for you. With thousands of systems integrators and suppliers, the Exchange is the one-stop spot for end users, suppliers, and integrators to connect and do business. Whether you are an end user looking for qualified system integration or suppliers, or an integrator or supplier trying to reach customers, the CSIA Industrial Automation Exchange is the place to be. See for yourself at www.csiaexchange.org. So what are some of the approaches you've taken to meet the challenge of talent acquisition?
So looping back on that first question, with in terms of capacity, we're working a lot with schools and colleges and a lot of professional associations to really try to farm more talent. And these are things that you see every day, like FIRST Robotics and programs that really reach into the middle schools or the high schools to get people interested in the field. But specifically for the Right Now solution, what we found is utilizing programs like Math Squared here in Michigan, which is focused on apprenticeship. And these programs exist in different states with different flavors, but there has been a strong focus in many states on apprenticeship and really building out that middle skill tier, that technician skill set. A 4-year degreed engineer has a set of skills. A technician has a different set of skills. So we've taken advantage of some of those programs that facilitate apprenticeships and skilled trades development. But one specific project that I'm particularly proud of is we actually partnered with some local chapters here for the Society of Manufacturing Engineers who give out scholarships. And there are a number of associations that do this. They target scholarship money at people who are interested in the particular field or profession that the association serves. And what we found is that the association's already done the job of identifying and filtering that talent to give us really a qualified pool of people, right? If they're qualified enough to receive scholarship money, these are clearly students who we want to target as prospects for employment. So what we did was we did an experiment where we offered to sponsor an incoming reception, a welcome wagon, if you will, for students who were going to be going to university or college on an SME scholarship. We would convene those people all in one place, and we would recognize them for their accomplishments as scholars, but also then introduce them to our technology and our projects and the things that we did and got them interested in Brose as a company. And what resulted from that is we were able to hire 2 direct hire employees and about 6 interns. And if I look at the cost that it took us to host that reception versus the traditional cost of acquisition of a new employee, the math was easy. And when I pitched this to HR and to some of the other groups here, it was a very clear value proposition because, like I said, instead of scattergunning at a career fair and coming back with hundreds of resumes to have to kind of cull through, we had a pre-qualified pool of talent by some other process that was facilitated by an association. And then we were able to simply step in and connect what they were interested in as a major and show them what that looked like in the workplace. And by drawing that connection out, we were able to really matriculate them as employees to our company, which worked out really well. So that's an example of where I would say we took I don't want to call it a unique approach, but we just kind of connected the dots that were already there.
Nice. What advice would you give SIs in the industrial automation space to prepare for the future?
Well, I have to admit that list, if depending on how long this podcast can go, I can tell you that would be an extremely long list, and it might be a separate episode. But if I had to prioritize my kind of top five, I would say, first of all, SIs need to be looking at increasing their capability with simulation technology. One thing that I've noticed as a manufacturing guy is that I look at our product engineering groups and the people who are developing our products, and they're very far ahead of us in terms of simulation. They know before they test a prototype whether that prototype design is going to pass the requirement set or not. Before we ever put one product on a test stand, we know that product is robust and it's going to pass. In contrast to that, when we design a process, it's very much, how shall I say, like we did it back in 1989. We do a paper study, we draw some boxes and circles on a sheet of paper, we do some math, we kind of do some 3D visualization with CAD, and then we kind of trust that the construction of this process is going to look like what we said the math said it was going to be. So I would say anything we can do to increase simulation technology and do more virtual commissioning, scenario planning. I mean, it's really cumbersome to ask for different scenarios in process design. Okay, what if station 2 goes down for 10 minutes? What if operator 3 doesn't show up today? That requires days or even weeks of analysis by an engineer to redo all their mathematics, whereas in simulation, those are very fast scenarios that can be rerun and the impacts quantified. The next thing I would say is learning more about the customer's IT environment. The SIs are coming in and not only having to install capital equipment, but they're also having to integrate that equipment into an IT environment that isn't plant specific in many cases. A lot of IT environments are governed at the corporate level. The IT teams in our plants are very service and delivery oriented, but in terms of integration with the network and being able to talk to enterprise level systems, that integration work has to include IT. So I would say that if SIs can build connectivity into the IT organization for their customers, and depending on the size of the client, right, this could be as simple as including the IT lead from a smaller, medium-sized company. But if you're talking about a company like Brose with 9 plants in the region, and we really have IT governance at the corporate level, it's important that your buyers or your requisitioning engineers introduce you to those IT people so that you can assess the unique risks of integrating the machinery onto the IT platform. A third one would be considering the customer's needs for software and control standardization. Just like we'd like to have a lot of our tooling and a lot of our major subsystems, our robots, our controllers, our PLCs being standardized. Similarly, we want the software blocks to look the same, because when we're troubleshooting in the shop, it's very important that our maintenance technicians know that the code blocks look the same no matter what machine they're looking at. So I would say, now a lot of times the integrators are like, but that's not efficient for me. I like to use my way of doing software development. But really, finding that balance where the customer really needs the standardization to gain the benefits in MRO is really got to be traded off against the efficiency for the SI to be able to deliver the project in a reasonable time frame. So I would say that's for the future, striking that balance and getting that agreement with your customers. Developing a long-term strategy, that's a really important topic. Another one would be just general Industry 4.0 topics, integrating more machine learning, coming up with ways for importing algorithms into the machinery, into the integrated system, and providing that connectivity back to the corporate IT systems. One of the reasons I think IT has been slower to transform manufacturing is because we have a lot of legacy equipment that's out there. There's a lot of installed base that's been out there. It's fully depreciated. It's sitting on a shop floor, but it's still kerchunking and making parts and making widgets, like a champ. And so I think that as the future continues to march ahead, as we continue to march forward to the future, we're going to see more and more of these Industry 4.0 IT topics creep into our future installed base, and retrofitting our existing installed systems are going to be very important and could be value-added services for SIs as they obtain more of these engagements. A final one I would say would be development methods. I alluded earlier that our process for designing a manufacturing system tends to be lagging behind some of the other technologies that are out there for developing products. And in this case, I would say the same thing's true about the way we develop our processes. In software development, you've seen a lot of migration toward an agile method where you do frequent, fast sprints to get to the next step. Whereas in process design and development, we still tend to look at it as a holistic planning process. From soup to nuts, we got to have the whole thing scoped out from the beginning, and we plan and we plan and we plan and we plan. And until we get to the perfect plan, we can't execute. And that's kind of flies in the face of all these emerging methods for doing process and system development. And Agile is a great example of that. We've actually done an experiment here at Brose where we've said, let's take our planning process for this particular project, throw it out the window, and take an Agile approach and see what happens. Because we were faced with compressed timing, we were faced with high cost pressure that really didn't lend itself well to our traditional planning processes that would have taken weeks or months. So what we said was, hey, let's take this in chunks, let's break down the work, let's just get to the next sprint and see what happens. And what we found, at least the initial findings have been, we've been able to be much more productive. People are clear on what they need to do. We're not getting stuck in analysis paralysis, or we're not getting stuck in these trade-off discussions where, well, if this, then that, I need more money to make more time, or this or that. It's, hey, we're just trying to get to the next goalpost. And that's been very rewarding for us. So I would say for future SIs that are looking toward the future, take a look at these approaches and do some experiments, do some small projects in your own shop. Not saying you have to put a customer project or a client at risk, but you can certainly identify some things in your own four walls where maybe this approach could be experimented with and perhaps then leveraged as a competitive advantage in the market.
I'm glad you said that, because next week I have scheduled a recording on that very topic of Agile project management, so that dovetails nicely. What advice would you give SIs who are looking to get new business or even retain their business going forward?
Well, definitely, like I said before, SIs who can demonstrate high project management skill are definitely going to be higher value. Their relationships are going to be very strong because they're going to gain trust not only with the technical teams, like the people that I lead, but they're going to gain a lot of trust with the business side of the house, whether it's project management or the operation. There's a lot of trust that gets built when we can execute well on the project management side. I would also say that experience with new pricing models, so whether that's fixed fee or results focused versus time and material, I think that is something that could provide a lot of competitive advantage to SIs in the space. I've seen some of them experiment with this, and it's worked out very well, because then the communication becomes much more transparent and much more focused on outcomes, as opposed to, well, we budgeted 400 hours and now it's 450 and we need to have a negotiation, or there's a plus minus list, and well, yeah, it's 50 hours for this, but you save 20 hours on that. Whereas if we focus on the result, we avoid a lot of the hedging or the behavioral economics stuff that happens when we see that we're kind of going over the budgeted hours or the budgeted cost of the project. Not to say that those things don't need to be tracked, but by and large, I would say, if SIs are looking to get new business or build retention, these are things that they could try to do to accomplish that. And I would say that a lot of customers would welcome the opportunity to be, focused on results and not have to worry about throwing information out there about potential changes or things like this, where we can have a dialogue and say, what's the impact of this, without worrying about, well, am I going to consume 10 more hours talking about this topic as opposed to focusing on the result. So those would be, the big ones. There's obviously more to it than that. Obviously engage with professional associations, be at those trade shows where the people are at. I mean, my team travels a lot to see what's out there. I mean, we're automotive people, but we go to trade shows where we're seeing exhibited technologies for medical devices and aerospace, because we don't know everything. And it's quite possible that a problem that we're having, or a solutions provider to the aerospace industry, might be able to help us get out of a situation that we're seeing in automotive manufacturing. So we're not too proud to look to other sectors where maybe these problems have been solved. So definitely be visible, be out there, and don't be shy about sharing your successes, because that's what we're really looking for, is solutions, not necessarily a specific technology.
Do you have any other final thoughts, something that you maybe wish you would have been able to work into the discussion here?
I think the big thing is change control is really something that is a systemic and persistent topic for SIs and their clients, and I've been on both sides of that. That talk about change control has really been a topic of discussion, at least when we do a supplier open forum or town hall. That seems to come up a lot. The suppliers get frustrated, our SIs get frustrated when we come around the corner with surprise changes, and obviously we don't like it when we get the surprise on the backside. Yeah, well, a bunch of this stuff changed. It's out of the scope. So it's a two-way street, but I would say knuckling down and really figuring out how we're going to do change management. Again, it goes back to project management skill level, right? Change management is a discipline inside of project management. And I would say that is something that I would welcome the opportunity to talk to as many SIs as possible about how to get to a standardized way of managing change on a given project.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Talking Industrial Automation. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Joe, for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also help others find us by sharing your favorite episodes with colleagues. Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Thanks also to bensound.com for the music bumpers. Until next time.